I'm going to talk about our latest prevalence study in Victoria, and I'm going to give you some findings and talk about the pattern that we've seen in the last couple of prevalence studies in Victoria. Can you people hear me if I'm over on the other side? Okay, just briefly a bit about what I'm going to talk about. There'll be a little bit of an introduction, then I'll go through the methodology for our most recent prevalence survey. I'll talk a little bit about the questions that we asked in the survey. I'll provide a little bit of background about poker machines, EGMs, in Victoria. I'll present a little bit about the findings, specifically in the frequency of play with problem gamblers and moderate risk gamblers as per PGSI, and then I'll encapsulate it all in a nutshell. When I was just fossicking around, I came across this particular document, and I came across this introduction by Max actually. Mental disorders are not randomly distributed throughout populations. To a degree, they follow existing lines of structural inequality and disadvantage, both between and within societies. And that was, I wrote down in brackets then, Dr. Max Wendon Abbott in 1993. And that got me thinking. It was food for thought in terms of the findings that we're finding, the results that we're finding in Victoria in terms about the distribution of some of problem gambling prevalence. So it's just food for thought. The prevalence study, that's a picture of the actual physical document, and it's available on the Foundation website, along with about 14 or 16 fact sheets from the prevalence study. Schottler Consulting did the field work for us, and the study itself was jointly funded by the Department of Justice and Regulation and the Foundation. And it was covered by 2 MOUs. A general MOU between the Department and the Foundation to undertake research, and another MOU specifically for the study. So it took a long time. I think it took longer to get the MOUs written and signed than the actual study. Okay, methodology. 13,554 Victorian adults aged over 18 were surveyed. CATI, computer-assisted telephone interviews, were used. Random digit dialing. We had dual frame. So 1,003 were mobile samples and 12,551 landline. The mobiles, we didn't use a database of mobile numbers. We actually phoned mobile numbers themselves randomly, and that's problematic in Victoria because the prefixes don't align with, problematic in Australia. The prefixes don't align with the jurisdictions. So if your prefix is 0404, it doesn't mean you're from Victoria. You could be from Queensland. So it was an expensive and lengthy process. 70, 20, 10 oversampling. We know that problem gamblers and people who play poker machines frequently are clustered in certain local government areas. So we looked at the expenditure in each of the local government areas in Victoria, and we did a 70, 20, 10. So those local government areas that had high expenditure, we oversampled in those at 70. 20% were from the medium EGM expenditure local government areas, and 10% from the low EGM expenditure areas. So we were trying to find people who were likely to have problematic gambling behaviour. We stratified by the Department of Health regions, so we were consistent with the 2008 survey. And we conducted interviews in Mandarin, Cantonese, Italian and Greek. They were the 4 most common languages when we did the telephone calls. Okay, We were in the field June to November 2014. We subsampled 1 in 10 non-problem gamblers and non-gamblers, 1 in 4 low-risk gamblers, and all PGSI problem and moderate risk gamblers were sampled. Our response rates, 68.4 for landline, 68.2 for mobile. Survey questions. We asked, after the initial agreeing to participate, we asked everyone gambling activity and participation questions, and the way we did that is we asked if they participated in an activity, then we asked the channel, whether they did it online, face-to-face, in a casino, on a cruise ship, you know, the location, and then how often they gambled, and then we coded that. After the participation questions were asked, we administered the PGSI. We asked questions, whoops, I don't think I'll go backwards. Okay, we asked questions on harm. We hadn't asked questions on harm in 2008, but because in the Responsible Gambling Foundation, one of our objectives is to reduce and minimise harm, we thought we'd ask a few questions on harm. We asked questions on gambling money management, FPOS use and withdrawal. We asked a range of questions on pre-commitment. On the 1st of December last year, Your Play was introduced into Victoria. Your Play is a voluntary pre-commitment scheme. So all people who responded who were EGM gamblers were given all the questions on pre-commitment. There was no subsampling there. The group who responded on EGM were used as the pre-commitment sample, and pre-commitment has commenced, and the same group are being followed at 6 months and at 1 year as post-pre-commitment. So we're using this survey as an evaluation of the pre-commitment Your Play system in Victoria. We asked questions on casino loyalty, unrestricted EGMs at casinos, the gaming area, the VIP gaming area. We asked a whole range of questions on help-seeking behaviour, on visits to doctors and GPs, on reported diagnoses of depression, anxiety. We used the cage for the alcohol because we used it in 2008, venue-based gambling and demographics. Okay, just by way of background, in 1992 poker machines were introduced into Victoria. In 1998 we had a total of 27,500 poker machines capped for hotels and clubs, and an additional 2,500 for casinos, or one casino for the casino. In 2014, the EGM numbers for hotels and clubs were 27,372, and a total of 2,628 for the casino. And the EGM numbers have remained unchanged since 1998. There's still 30,000. However, EGM participation has decreased. It has decreased since 2002 through to 2014, and there's been a gradual decline in real EGM expenditure. So this graph here, this is a graph of EGM losses from 1999-2000 through to 2014-15. Now, I don't know if you can see it. The red line is nominal and the blue line is real. The blue line, real equals nominal plus inflation, adjusted for inflation. So you can see that EGM expenditure, you can see the pattern, how it's decreased over the years. I need to also say in the last 6 months, after this 2014-15 period, from July through to December 2015, recently the VCGLR has indicated that player losses are continuing to rise, with a further increase of 21 million in nominal expenditure, or 1.6% over the same period as last year. So this is just at 2014-15. Okay, some findings. The prevalence rate is 0.1%. In 2008 it was 0.7, not statistically significant at all, and that translates to 35,500 Victorians. The prevalence estimate of low risk has increased from 5.7 to 8.9. That equates to about 391,000 Victorians, and the low risk increase is linked to gambling in women. Harm. We asked the question in the last 12 months, have you experienced problems because of someone else's gambling? And they could say yes, no, don't know, refused. And we found that an estimated 2.8% of Victorian adults reported experiencing problems because of someone else's gambling, and that's approximately 122,500, and that roughly equates to 3 to 4 people affected from someone else's gambling. We think that's the first time we asked this question. We think that might be an underestimate because other research we're doing on harm and problems and people being affected by other people's gambling, the questions were asked a bit differently, and when people were asked, have you experienced problems from someone else's gambling, they would say no. And if we ask questions, have you experienced problems such as loss of sleep, feeling anxious, feeling depressed, worrying about your partner's gambling, they would say yes. So when the specific problems were mentioned, the responses were higher. But this is the first time we asked this question. So that's the findings on that one. Participation in gambling in Victorian adults has decreased from 2008 to 2014. Participation in EGM gambling has declined from 21.5 in 2008 to 16.8 in 2014. Participation in racing has increased. We asked the question a bit differently in 2014 to 2008, and that was as a result of some of the work we did in the longitudinal study. At the very beginning of each survey we asked participation questions and people would say no, and that was how we worked out who participated in an activity or not. And then in the waves of the longitudinal, in the third wave, we asked everyone, absolutely everyone, including non-gamblers, if they had gambled in the Spring Racing Carnival. And we found that 5% non-gamblers had actually gambled during the Spring Racing Carnival. So this time when we asked the question and we included including participation in the Spring Racing Carnival. So that may or may not explain the difference, the increase there. Participation in sports and events betting increased from 4% to 4.8. However, the rates of participation in sports and event betting remain consistently lower than other forms of gambling, and the increase from 4 to 4.8 is almost exclusively in males. This is interesting. Frequency of play. So in 2008, people who bet on the races played an average of 67 times per year, but in 2014 it was 204 times. So that's quite a big increase in betting. Gaming machines in 2008, an average of 56 times a year. In 2014, 88 times a year. And table games in 2008, 31 times a year was the average, and it's 59 times a year. So we can see that the frequency of play has increased between 2008 and 2014, although the prevalence rate of problem gambling hasn't. This is frequency of play of moderate risk gamblers. So wagering and table games, no statistically significant change. Gaming machines, moderate risk gamblers played an average of 23 times in 2008, yet in 2014 it was 86 times. Lotto, Powerball or pools, 28 times per year was the average in 2008, and in 2014 the average was 74 times. So increase in frequency between the two prevalence periods. surveys. Okay, findings from, continuing the findings between the two different years. EFTPOS, problem gamblers. Okay, since the 1st of July 2012, automatic teller machines have been banned from gaming venues in Victoria. And this graph shows that the average EFTPOS usage per session increases with PGSI risk. So you've got the category on the left-hand side and you've got the average EFTPOS usage per session as it was reported in the survey on the right-hand side. And you can see how it increases with risk. The question we asked was, over the past 12 months, how many times per gambling session did you typically get money for gambling through EFTPOS? And then they just said the number, or don't know, refused. So you can see that people with higher risk, according to the PGSI, withdraw through EFTPOS more frequently per session, withdraw more money. Okay, gaming machine players, where are they? Okay, so on the left-hand side you've got the year, 2002-3, where there was a prevalence survey, 2007-8, where we had a prevalence survey, 2013-14, where we had a prevalence survey. Column 1, mean estimated resident population 18 years plus in Victoria. That's taken from the Australian Bureau of Statistics 2013-14 figures. The next column is the participation rate in EGMs, and that is an indicative participation in gaming machine playing by adults, and it's obtained from the prevalence surveys that we've done in 2003, 2008, 2013-14. And the last column, the estimated number of Victorian adult residents playing gaming machines, that's in numbers there. So you can see that since 2003, there's been approximately 39% decrease in Victorian adults playing gaming machines. The prevalence rate stayed the same. There's not been, however, a 39% decline in the gaming machine or poker machine expenditure, as you saw earlier in the graphs that we showed. And in fact, there's been probably an increase of about 7%. So what this means is that fewer players are spending more on average on the machine. I think I might have written something else here that's not there, but I'm not sure. I'll just check. No, that'll do. Okay, so in a nutshell, so what does this all mean? There's been a decline in the number of gaming machine players since 2002-3 through to 2014, about 39% decline. Over that same period, real expenditure on gaming machines has declined by over 19%. So fewer gaming machine players, fewer pokey players are accounting for current expenditure levels. So the survey that was released last year in 2015 shows that moderate risk and problem gamblers who play gaming machines do so more often than they did in 2008, and that they withdraw more from the EFTPOS facilities than other gaming machine players. And we know that the proportion of all the moderate risk players, that's 39%, and 51% of the proportion of problem gamblers, 51%, who state that gaming machines are their highest spend, is higher than any other form of gambling. So this is all questions that we've asked in the study. So what does it mean? I just go back to that earlier quote about mental disorders are not randomly distributed throughout populations, and thinking about how we can apply that to gambling. It's really food for thought. Joint funding, I mentioned that before. It's done, the study's been funded jointly by the Department of Justice and Regulation and the Foundation. Paul apologises for not being here, but he'll be at the think tank. And I'd like to acknowledge all the participants in the survey, Schottler Consulting, who did the field work, and you for listening. Okay, thank you.